You know what you should do? You should follow me on Twitter at Brommer018. Link in the description. Do it now.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome along to another FIFA 20 custom tactics video, the series where I show you how to recreate and adapt real life systems in FIFA 20 so they'll actually work in game as effectively as possible. So I put a vote out yesterday, it was, as of recording this, and wanted to see what you guys wanted, and it turns out out of the four most popular suggestions, a Mourinho system was the one that you guys voted for. So out of the choice of many that we still had to do, we've only covered his Real Madrid system so far. I really had a choice of four, and I decided to go with one of his Inter Milan systems, a season in which he did of course win the treble with Inter Milan, the Serie A, the Champions League and the Coppa Italia as well. Now there was a couple of different formations and systems that Mourinho sort of floated through with Inter Milan, as you'd expect with a Mourinho team. But the one that we're going to go with today, and I want to show you, is the 4-2-3-1. And the reason being is that, this is the one that they predominantly played in the big games. In particular, the likes of the big Champions League games, of course, and obviously when they played in the likes of the Serie A and domestic games as well, and they came up against the big teams and the rivals, they generally went with the 4-2-3-1. There was also sort of a narrow diamond system, also went to a 4-3-3 occasionally. There's a range of different formations, but this is the one I think that not only was the one they use in big games, but also is the most effective in FIFA. So we're going to go with this one today. Now, obviously we've got the 4-2-3-1 wide, that's the one you're looking for, and for once we don't actually have to do any changes in terms of positions, so that makes a nice change. Usually we're altering the base positions for these players, but today you won't need to. For some reason that's saying right wing back, we'll just have him at right back, that's fine. Better move him inside as well. So yeah, we're all good to go on that front. So what we'll do is we'll go through the player instructions first, and I'll explain all of them as we go through, and then we'll move on to the tactics as well at the end. You should hopefully see some gameplay, and we'll have suitable players on the right hand side as well. So we should be good to go. So we start off with the keeper. We've got Handanovic here. Of course, this would have been Julio Cesar back in the day. Hopefully I'll have shown a lineup for you of the general consensus team that they did go with, but we'll talk about that anyway. So here we got him on comes for crosses and sweeper keeper. So with comes for crosses, this is something we talk about where we adapt it for FIFA. That is, on this game, when you're defending crosses, it can sometimes lead to sort of fumbling about, a little bit hard to defend, hard to clear. So with your keeper coming for crosses and being a bit more aggressive in those situations, it just relieves a bit of pressure from you, because they're quite overprotected in this game. So with it on comes for crosses, it just relieves that pressure, as I say, and you deal with those situations a bit better. We also have him on sweeper keeper as well. Now, it's important to note that the depth of the defensive line is quite low, but we have him on sweeper keeper anyway, just to replicate the sort of aggression that Julio Cesar was like, and that's very much what he was. Sort of like as a goalkeeper throughout his career, he could very easily, comfortably play on the front foot. So, we sort of replicate that, and just in case you're having to deal with balls over the top as well, which you do tend to in FIFA, especially online. So now we can move on to the defence. First off, we've got the two centre-backs. This would, of course, generally be the incredible world-class pairing, actually, of Lucio and also Walter Samuel. So we've actually changed the interceptions here, and we changed them to conservative. That's to try and replicate the defensive solidity and structured sort of feel to it as much as possible. You don't want them running out of position. You don't want them charging down. They always stick to their guns, remain generally within the width of the 18-yard box, particularly when they're out of possession, and just keep that sort of narrow and defensive line going. So with conservative interceptions, you just replicate that a little bit better. Next we can move on to the right back. This would of course be Maicon Skriniar here, but I'm just showing it for the sake of the tactics. So with Maicon, you've actually got a different role to the left back, which would have generally been Javier Zanetti. So with Maicon, you've actually got a more attacking player, and Javier Zanetti was the one who sort of stayed back more and was a bit more solid, didn't venture forward on a regular basis. So with Maicon, of course, you've got him on join the attack and also overlap, and that's the best way to recreate his role. There's not too much you need to do there other than that. And obviously with the suitable players that you see on the right hand side, bear that in mind as well. You'll have a more attacking, pacey, energetic fullback compared to the left back, who you're looking for someone to be a little bit more solid, not so adventurous going forward, maybe with a medium attacking work rate rather than a high one. On the other hand, though, here we've got stay back while attacking and inverted, because of course with Zanetti, with Maicon pushing forward, they generally then sort of create a free back. And when we talked about Jose Mourinho's systems, when we did the Real Madrid tactic a few months ago, what we mentioned is that what happens with a Mourinho team is that when one fullback goes forward, the other one stays back, and they sort of tuck into to create sort of a back three. And that's one of the reasons why you tend to find his teams are so defensively solid, because not enough teams actually do that. But actually, it's one of the best ways just to create that extra bit of solidity, you know, and to give you that sort of reinforcement going backwards. So when you are attacking, and even if you are in an attacking side as well, who likes to press forward, likes to get the ball relentlessly, still, you know, keep a fullback back and have it in a free, because then it just gives you that bit more solidity and protection from opposition counter-attacks. So that's really what you're looking from your left back here. Moving on to the two holding midfielders now, slightly different roles for the two. We're going to say the right defensive midfielder was the Cambiasso role, and the left one more of the, you know, maybe the Dejan Stankovic or Thiago Motta type roles. So with the Cambiasso, you've got someone a little bit more defensive minded. So we've got it on man mark, and that's very self-explanatory. We all know how you know, Mourinho systems is renowned for that sort of man marking system. And then on attacking support, we've got this on stay back while attacking. So he should never be venturing forward at all. He's a defensive ball-winning midfielder, and that is his job. You don't want him sort of bombing on forward as like a box-to-box man. So have him on stay back while attacking. And finally, we have him on cover wing. Now, you're going to see this is separate to the left defensive midfielder, because obviously you've got Maicon advancing forward, and also you've got the right midfielder who gets forward as well into advanced areas. So you're looking for him to cover the wing, you know, in order to fill out those spaces and prevent the counter attacks. So moving on to the left defensive midfielder, of course, it's a little bit different here. Obviously, you've still got him on man mark, which is very self-explanatory, but then with attacking support, we've got this on balanced. So what you'd have found is, not so much with Thiago Motta, but when Stankovic would play more in this role, he was a little bit more adventurous. Not too much, not to the point where he was an out-and-out box-to-box midfielder, but he'd certainly be getting forward more. He wouldn't be as passive in the attacking phase of play. So we have this on balance to recreate that as best as we possibly can. Remember, he's not going to be making runs in beyond the strikers, which is what happens here with get forward. But you know, you've just got him being a little bit less passive, bit more activity from him, you know, in those attacking movements. And finally, with defensive position, of course, we had Stankovic on cover wing, but here we're going to have on cover centre, because as we mentioned, the left back is actually staying back, and he's staying inverted as well to form that back three. So there's no need for him to have to come out wide and cover the wing. Therefore, within cover centre, you just sort of cover off that counter attack through the middle as well, to give yourself as much protection as possible. So they really complement each other quite well. So now we're going to move on to the attacking three. We'll start off with, you know, Eriksen, who would of course been, you know, generally Wesley Sneijder in this situation. So you want him on comeback on defence, obviously, because all three of the attacking midfielders, they'll be coming back and bedding into that sort of 10-man defensive unit. But then on support and crosses, have this on balance. So what you're trying to recreate here is sort of the mobility of Wesley Sneijder. So rather than him constantly getting into the box in those situations, sometimes you want him, say a cross is cleared, a shot parried away, etc. Sometimes he's going to be on the edge of the box and circling around in that area just to try and pick up the pieces and start the attack again. And, you know, and talking about that mobility probably is a good segue into the positioning freedom, where we have him on free roam. And that's, again, to try and create that sort of mobility and replicate that as best as we possibly can. You want Sneijder as the main creative outlet in this team. Of course, Eriksen here, who is actually probably worth... I'll probably put him in the suitable players, because I think he's actually a like-for-like replacement for Wesley Sneijder. Actually, Christian Eriksen is a really, really good option here as that sort of free-roam guy. Lots of mobility, get him on the ball as much as possible as your, you know, sort of predominant creative outlet. So, you know, I think here free-roam perfectly recreates that. So that's it. You don't need to change anything else. Keep the interceptions on normal. We can now move on to the two wingers. So these have also got different roles as well. First off, we'll start with Martinez. This changed a little bit. Generally, it would have been Goran Pandev, of course, not an out-and-out winger. You know, sometimes they played. I remember in one game, I think it was against Barcelona, they played Christian Kivu, the left slash centre back there. So you know, this changed a lot, and this was a bit makeshift, but it was about fitting into the system as best as possible. So you have him on comeback attack, as of course already mentioned. He beds into that unit of 10, but this time you want him on stay wide, so he's creating the width, and with the fullback not overlapping here, obviously you need someone to create the width on this side. So that's why you have Martinez in this case, staying out wide as best, as much as he possibly can to create that width. And you create that bit of space, then either the fullback's going to go with him and create more space for a run in the middle of the fullback and the centre back in the opposition team, or he's going to get a load of space out wide because they're going to stay narrow, in which case you get the ball out to him and you work on it from there. With support runs, keep this on balanced, therefore you've still got some emphasis on the counter-attacking, getting in behind, but not always the case, because of course with fast build-up, which is what we're going to have it on, attacks can sometimes stagnate if you don't get it spot on initially. So we keep this on balanced, and then you can sort of be as versatile as possible, really. And finally, with support on crosses, get into the box for the cross. Of course, particularly, I'm not going to suggest strikers here, really. But obviously, with Pandev, who was a striker at the time and he was playing at left, getting him into the box was a really good alternative for them. So particularly when you're whipping in balls, you've got an extra target, particularly someone like him who was fairly good in the air as well. So now we can move on to the right winger here. This would, of course, generally been Samuel Eto'o. So obviously you've got a little bit of different roles here. Obviously, come back on defence. That's first and foremost the most important thing. But then this time on chance creation, you want him cut inside. So, you know, we sort of, we sort of assume Samuel Eto'o to be a striker, which he is. He always was. And that's how they best tried to replicate it, because obviously they want him out wide. Mourinho only wanted one striker so he could crowd out the midfield as much as possible, but Samuel Eto'o is of course best coming into those central areas. So with this, he'd drift into those central areas, but he still had the work rate to play as a right winger when he needed to, i.e. tracking back and covering for Maicon when, you know, the sort of situation arises. So with cut inside, you get him supporting the central striker more and the central attacking midfielder as well, and also you're creating a mismatch for the opposition as well, because what does the left back do? Does the left back follow him? Does he stay in his man, stay in his zonal area even? You know, that's the question, and obviously that creates a mismatch match option for the opposition. You can couple that in with getting behind as well. Obviously, other than like Pandev, who doesn't have quite the pace needed, Samuel Eto'o was of course a very fast pacey player. So with that getting behind, you're sort of playing to his strengths a lot more here, getting him in behind, utilising that counter-attacking threat as much as possible. Finally, like Pandev as well on the left, get into the box across. Of course, you want as much support as you possibly can for that central striker. So that rounds it off for the midfield. Now we can finally finish with the striker. So we want him on stay central here, and he's going to be the target man of the team. You've got a lot of mobility and movement from the attacking three midfielders, so you don't really need the striker drifting wide to try and create that more. He's very much in between the posts in the 18-yard box and do his work from there. He's the target man, and this would have been Diego Milito. Of course, it switched about a little bit. Sometimes Eto'o would play there. Occasionally Pandev would play there. Of course, they had Ibrahimovic the season before, so you know it's moved around a little bit, but in this season it was generally Diego Milito. And with attacking runs, you have him on getting behind. So again, you're trying to have that emphasis on the counter-attack as much as possible. If you find that you've sort of worked your way out the field a little bit more and he's trying to get him behind, he'll still be playing on the last man, in which case the sort of responsibility falls onto the attacking three midfielders to sort of create something and, you know, use their movement and mobility to create something in that way. Finally, with defensive support, have this on balance. This time you do have an out ball when you're looking to get it up the field as quickly as possible, just to hold it up when needed, rather than with them come back on defence and, you know, you don't have that outlet going forward on the counter attack. So that rounds it off for player instructions. Now we can quickly move on to the tactics, and I can show you what sort of we go with here. So we're actually starting with pressure on heavy touch. Now, A lot of people mistake a Mourinho system, in particular this one, for all-out defence, in which case that would be drop back. But it's not always the case. They're a very versatile side, and obviously when you're playing against the likes of maybe a team a little bit worse than you, who is expected to not have the lion's share of possession, expected to not win the game, you have to be a little bit more active, not so passive in the game. So we have this on pressure on heavy touch, in which case when the team sort of lose pass, heavy touch, etc., they then start going on the front foot, pressing the opposition as much as possible. So with that, you can still bed back into your defensive shape when you need to, but with pressure on heavy touch, you'll have those moments of activity that are really going to help you going forward. With defence, we moved this down to 2. Obviously, for the defensive solid teams, they're very narrow. They don't let teams play through them. They try and make the teams play around them, in which case they've got to start whipping balls in. And, on FIFA in particular, that's not going to help you very much, because crosses are hard to defend but also hard to score. They're almost very irrelevant completely, particularly high crosses. Ground crosses are a little bit more effective, but in particular high crosses, very hard to do. So when you've got it as narrow as possible, just let them mix it out wide, because crosses generally aren't going to come to much. With the depth, we've lowered this down to 4. Now, I messed about with this a little bit, trying to find one that's going to work with FIFA, but obviously with a Jose Mourinho team, it's a deep defensive line. We mentioned that when we talked about the centre-backs earlier on. So we've got this on 4 just so it's still kind of a mid-block, because when it goes down to 3 and minus, obviously when you're playing against teams who are a little bit worse, it sort of creates a fumbling sort of block them. But you can obviously move this around. It's never a set in, none of these tactics are ever set in stone. You can mess about with them if you want to try and find something that's optimal to you. I went with 4, and as you can see in the gameplay, I also went with 4 there, and it works out okay. So go with what you prefer, really. Offensively now, of course, fast build-up, commonly associated as a counter-attacking team, and that's what they did, and that's the best way you're going to replicate that in game. You're going to be very, very efficient on the counter-attack. Obviously you're going to need pacey players, and that will come up in the suggested players tab on the right hand side of the screen. So for that, with fast build-up, you've got as much of an emphasis on that as you possibly need to be as clinical in that sort of area. With the width, we moved this up to 6. So the problem is, when you've got it up really wide in the 8, 9, 10 category, is that it's just very hard to sort of retain possession at all. And so, obviously you're not looking to necessarily dominate possession in this system, but when the time comes that you haven't been able to hit the team on the counter, and then you've got to work your way up. Teams are very, very wide. All the players are quite far from each other, and it's hard just to get really attacking moves going. So we keep this on 6 actually, which means that then they'll be a little bit closer together, but it's more balanced, more varied. So you've still got that width when you need to, but players are just a bit closer to each other. So it's going to give you a little bit of help in that sort of area. And finally, with players in the box, we have this on 7. So you've got 3 to 4 players. So what we're looking at here is we're looking at the central striker, and we're looking at the 2 wingers, and then occasionally Sneijder, would have drifted into the box as well. Like I say, very versatile, and he'd do, sort of all areas of the game, drift on to the either wing. He'd either stay around the edge of the box, get into the box, depending on what the situation required. And so that's why you're looking in that situation to have 7, and with a cam in particular, a central attacking midfielder, obviously you want someone who's very all-rounded and very mobile. And with corners and free kicks, what we always do is we have these on 4. In that case, obviously you have more players getting forward, so it's more of a targets in the area basically to whip the ball into, because again, set pieces on this game quite hard, particularly corners, quite hard to score from, fairly irrelevant, but obviously you've still got 2 men back in this situation, so you can then counteract any counter-attacking threat from the opposition. So that's just about it for this system then, guys. I hope you have enjoyed it. If you've got any questions, please do let me know. If anyone would like to see the other formations from the Mourinho's Inter days, such as the narrow diamond, please do let me know in the comment section as well. I can add that to the list. Don't forget to check out my real football videos that I've just started doing. My first one was on Vincent Kompany leaving Man City and why that cost him a title challenge. So if you could go and check that one out, I would really appreciate that as well. Don't forget to leave a like on the video if you've enjoyed it, and subscribe to the channel for more regular football and gaming content. Ring the bell as well so that you get notifications every time I upload. That's very, very important. On that note, we are going to finish it off there. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.